Hey there everybody, Scotia here with quite an interesting video for today. So in case you missed it, Game Informer has been doing quite a lot of coverage on Street Fighter 6 the last couple of days. They've been doing a lot of articles, and the latest issue of their magazine has a big kind of cover piece on Street Fighter 6 itself. And I've got the issue, I've already read through it, and for the most part there's not a lot of like new stuff in there. Most of it is kind of reiterated stuff that we already know about, kind of a little bit more details on things that Nakayama and Matsumoto have already discussed in depth. But the main part of all this coverage has been about Ken, and that's what this video is going to be about mostly. So the brunt of this new info on Ken in this Game Informer coverage is mostly just about kind of like his design and like why he looks different and all that. And once again, it's a lot of stuff that we've already known about, like Ken's on the run, framed for a crime he didn't commit, blah blah blah, like separated from Eliza and Mel. One part that's interesting that they do go in a bit more depth about is, I think it's Nakayama who says that the reason that they've gone in this direction with Ken is because they felt like that Ken was starting to lose his reason for fighting, in the sense that, his life for so long now has been so stable. Like, he's got the wife, he's got the kid, he's got the student in with Sean, and in that sense, I think Capcom were feeling that he just, there was less reason for Ken to keep coming back outside of, him being like one of the major characters in the series. So in a way, they've created this new storyline for Ken, and they go out their way to say that he's not the protagonist of Street Fighter 6 like Luke is, but he's definitely a central character. So I feel like even though Luke is still the protagonist, I definitely think Ken is going to be like a deuteragonist, or a kind of like secondary protagonist. So yeah, I do get where they're coming from with that. I understand kind of why they would feel like that. For me personally, I feel like Ken was in a very interesting spot, to be honest, at the end of Third Strike. He was in a pretty happy spot. He had the whole family there, and he was finally taking Sean in as an apprentice. And I think that's a common misconception people kind of forget about, is that Sean in Street Fighter 3, in both Street Fighter 3 games like Second Impact and Third Strike, like, Sean is never a student. We've never seen Sean as a student of Ken's until like right at the end of Third Strike and Ken's ending, or Sean's, I guess. And I think it's a shame that we've just kind of seemingly skipped that. Like, we've just completely gone past that. Sean's training with Ken will probably have like long finished by now. So yeah, I think that's a shame. I think there was definitely room to keep Ken in his happy state. I'm not against it. I think this is a very interesting thing with Ken. But yeah, like, whether or not that it needed to happen, I think is a discussion that, we'll obviously wait and see what happens once, the game is out and we've played through the story mode and we've seen exactly fully like what Ken's deal is and how it ends. But yeah, I definitely think the topic will come up in the future of like, did this need to happen? But yeah, for now, I get their reasoning, but yeah, I'm a bit kind of skeptical on the fence about whether or not, it was necessary. So what is probably the biggest info that was dropped from all this Game Informer coverage, mostly, the stuff focusing on Ken, is that they announced that Udon is working on a 4-issue miniseries based on Ken, with Ken as the main character and Luke as a pretty, major character. That is basically going to, I don't know if it's going to flat out explain what happened, but I think it's basically going to like lead up and kind of give a bit more of an idea of what happened to Ken and also Luke that, involved them with what is going on by the time we actually get to Street Fighter 6. We do have some, like, I guess, kind of work in progress panels that Udon was gracious enough to release as part of this Game Informer coverage, which obviously you'll probably have already been seeing as I'm talking about this. There's two things here, actually 2 or 3 things here that I think are worth note. So the first thing is that I'm pretty sure this one here on the screenshot you'll be looking at now, I'm pretty sure this kid is Mel. And if this is Mel, then we are definitely, I would say, at least 5 years post Third Strike, which is pretty crazy, because Third Strike was already like a decent, way into the series. Obviously it was the end point of the series for such a long time, but even then, it was only like, I'd say like 3 or 4 years post, like, I'd say around like Street Fighter 4. So like, it wasn't that far into the future, but like, it was pretty far in. And like, this is even further beyond that now, and Mel has always kind of been the best kind of like gauge in terms of like how much time has been, because obviously we've seen him as a baby in Street Fighter 4 when he was born, and then Street Fighter 3. But yeah, if this is Mel, and I'm pretty sure it is Mel because the article itself says that like Mel is a pretty, major character. Basically, so far they've only listed like 3 characters, being like major parts of this Udon comic series, and that's Ken, obviously, Luke, and Mel. So I'm pretty sure this is Mel. And yeah, so like, I'd say he looks about like I don't know, like maybe 11 to 12 years old, like 13 at the absolute max. So he's definitely like quite a bit older. We also see a bit of a younger Luke here. I think he's missing one of his scars. I think it's the scar across his eye that he has in Street Fighter 6. So I'm assuming that this comic series is going to explain like how he got the scar on his eye. And I'm pretty sure they've already kind of like, Game Informer have already kind of like, I guess, spoiled how this happens, because they've also shown off some of the arcade artwork of Ken's story mode, so I assume this will be the art style for the rest of the characters in the game's arcade mode. And it appears that Ken is in the process of being arrested for, you know, being involved in some sort of like terrorist bombing. So I assume we'll probably see this bombing in the Udon series, and that will probably, you know, lead into where things are at the start of Street Fighter 6. I am quite a fan of how the arcade artwork looks, actually. I know a lot of people weren't happy with how Bengus did his stuff in Street Fighter 5. I certainly thought it was very messy in terms of like, sometimes it would look alright, sometimes it would just look awful. And I know a lot of that was kind of like how rushed he was for Street Fighter 5, because obviously Street Fighter 5, very rushed development, especially at the start. But yeah, I think this is a great step up from that style of how Bengus did things, and I'm just glad it's different, you know. I really didn't want Bengus again, like, not because I think Bengus is bad art or anything. I think Bengus is a great artist, but like, I just really wanted to move on from him, and I think this is a great, you know, direction to go in, so I'm very much a fan of that. So that's pretty much it in terms of like stuff from the Game Informer coverage so far. I'm assuming that they're going to be dropping more like stuff throughout the month. I don't know if this is like a full month of coverage. I'm not expecting like a character reveal or anything from this, because I think they would have like said so by now. I do recall that when Mortal Kombat 11 did something like this, they announced Cetrion, and like they like showed her like right out the gate that like we're announcing this character. So yeah, nothing like that so far with the Street Fighter 6 Game Informer coverage, so I'm not expecting that here. So yeah, if you just wanted the news and you just wanted to find out, you know, some of the stuff from the Game Informer coverage, by all means go check it out yourself. It's worth reading all of it. From this point here though, I'm going to be kind of going into more of a kind of like, me kind of like scratching my head about something. And you've probably already gathered by the title or the thumbnail, I haven't decided what I'm going to title this video yet. I have in my head what it's going to be, but I don't know if I'm going to like go with that. But if I end up going with it, you know what I'm going to be talking about. And that is the complete lack of mention of Sean Matsuda in like anything relating to the Ken coverage from Game Informer. So you might be thinking like, ah, Scotia going on about like Sean again, you know, you're just a fanboy, blah, blah, blah. Normally I'd agree with you. Normally I'd be like, yeah, this is me just kind of like, you know, getting mad about something that, you know, isn't worth getting mad about. I'm not mad, but I'm more confused, or just I'm more interested, to be honest. I'm pretty sure, like, in a way, that I'm kind of gonna try and spin this into a good thing, because in my eyes, you know, just reading all of this stuff, it really feels like to me that they've gone out of their way to not mention Sean like at all in relation to Ken. And when I say they, I mean Capcom, not Game Informer. I'm fairly sure the author for Game Informer probably has no idea who Sean is, nor should he, you know, not his job really. He covers all sorts of stuff. He says he's a Ken main, but like, a Ken main can just be, oh, I played Street Fighter 2 in the arcades like 30 years ago, blah blah blah, you know, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, so the they I'm talking about is Capcom, and because I'm sure that when, you know, they write this article and they go to the developers and they talk to them, I'm pretty sure that like most of the stuff is just kind of like writing down what the developers say to them. So I'm pretty sure in this case, the Game Informer author of this article and the coverage, when he sat down and he talked to Matsumoto and Nakayama, they told him stuff, and he's basically just kind of like written it down and then reworded it for the article. And in that sense, in my logic when I think about this, I'm pretty sure that like it's actually Capcom, i.e. Matsumoto and Nakayama, who have gone out of the way to not mention Sean. And this might sound tinfoil hat theory or whatever, but I'm going to read a quote from the article, and I'm gonna, you know, go over why I think this is weird that they've not mentioned Sean in this, but you know, hopefully you'll kind of maybe see for yourself while I like say it. So here it goes. Longtime Street Fighter fans have seen Ken's evolution from Ryu's rival to husband of Eliza, father of Mel, and ex-vice president of the Masters Foundation. So what is a pretty glaring omission, you know, from that line that I just read out? It's obviously being Sean's master. Like, I know Sean is not a very well known character in the sense that like only like kind of hardcore fans of Street Fighter are really going to know who he is. But Sean meeting Ken and then Ken taking him under his wing and, you know, becoming his master, that's a pretty important part of Ken's overall like arc throughout the series. Ken has always been on this journey alongside Ryu, but they've always done things differently. And the major difference with Ken was that, you know, he had a family, he met Eliza, he married her, they had a kid, they had Mel. And those are all pretty big, you know, moments in Ken's life that we see throughout the Street Fighter series. And they're all mentioned in this article, like numerous times, not just that line, but in other parts of the coverage. And yet, you know, Ken taking Sean in and, you know, being his master and all that, that's just not mentioned. Like, Sean is not mentioned once, not even like alluded to. Like, there's no mention. Like, you would read this and you would never know that Ken, like, has a student, or at least had a student, depending on, you know, what's happened since Third Strike. And yeah, to me that's such a glaring thing. Like, it feels deliberate. It feels like they've gone out of their way to just not mention him, let alone like link him with Ken. And I can't help but wonder why. You know, I can immediately go to like the most like optimistic place possible with it and be like, oh, you know, it's because Sean's gonna have a massive role in the story and he's gonna be like day one DLC. Of course not. I know it's not gonna be like that kind of optimistic, but like it just seems interesting to me to just kind of go out of your way to not mention not only a character that people want, but like a character that, you know, a lot of people have said for a while now like has a good chance to be in this game. And I'm not going to say like this confirms something one way or the other. I think this very well, at the end of the day, it very well could be, you know, just Capcom kind of not really caring about Sean and not really wanting to mention him because they know nobody outside of like hardcore Street Fighter fans really know him. But yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with this, to be honest. I just kind of wanted to mention it. I've mentioned it a couple of places. I've talked about this on Twitter with a couple of people and on Discords and all that. But yeah, this is just, it's very interesting to me that they've kind of gone out of this way to like just not mention him. And, you know, normally it'd be like, you know, why would they mention him? Like, this is purely about Ken. But, and I get that, but like when they go through Ken's history in the series and they cover all the other major points, like in my opinion, when it comes to Ken and his kind of like the key points in his life throughout the series, it's rivalry with Ryu and training with Gouken, meeting Eliza, marrying Eliza, having Mel, training Sean. And all of those are mentioned except the last one. And it just stands out to me as soon as I read that article. And I like there's other times where kind of like stuff like this happens where they mention kind of like something where you could easily like fit in Sean, like you could fit in a line about like, oh, and then Sean, like there's just nothing, like he's just not mentioned at all in a way that to me just stands out. And yeah, kind of rambling I guess, but it's very interesting. I'm interested in seeing where it goes. I think at the end of the day, the absolute worst case scenario is that Sean is just nowhere to be seen in Street Fighter 6 when that game comes out next year. Like, he's not in Ken's story, he's not in World Tour, he's not in the Udon series, he's not even mentioned, he's just not there. I don't personally think that's going to happen. I think at some point he'll be mentioned, you know, he'll be referenced in some way at the absolute worst, but I think at the very least, I'm very confident that we'll at least get a cameo, whether it's in Ken's ending for the arcade mode, whether we go through World Tour and we see him. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm sure that Sean will make an appearance in some way, shape or form. But yeah, that's kind of it for now. Like I said, I just kind of wanted to go over that, and I just want to see what other people think about that. Like, by all means, read the full article. You know, don't just base everything off the one line that I, you know, have in this video. But yeah, I'm just going to leave it there. Like I said, if more stuff comes out that I think is newsworthy or, you know, worth making a video for, I'll do it. But yeah, that'll do for now. I will see you all later. Goodbye.
We await your return, warrior.